Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of a four-part online series around mapping out successful digital journeys, brought to you by Tata Consultancy Services Philippines and BusinessWorld Insights. My name is Tiago Renais, and I'll be your moderator for this first session, where we'll be exploring the topic of creating a culture of innovation towards an effective digital journey. When it comes to mapping out the digital journeys of organizations, digital transformation and innovation go hand in hand, paving the way forward into the future. But just as digital transformation is inspired by innovation, companies must first lay the foundation, building the right spaces, the right culture for that innovation to thrive. Earlier this year, the World Bank published its report, Innovation Imperative for Developing East Asia, where they argued for a pressing need to scale innovation across East Asia's developing economies. Most of these economies, including the Philippines, were found to have underperformed in terms of adopting new technologies and discovering new ones. The World Bank attributed this to limited information, weak capacity of companies, poor employee skills, and a lack of government support. Today, we are joined by experts from both the private and public sectors who will be weighing in on this and leading our discussion on the value of investing in a culture of innovation across workforces and leadership teams as the foundation for meaningful long-term digital transformation. For those of you in our audience, our panel will be taking questions later during the Q&A, so be sure to jot down your questions and share them with us through the questions tab on the right side of your screens. Now, with that, I'll be introducing each of our speakers today in turn and inviting them to share a few thoughts on today's topic. Our first panelist, I'm very pleased to introduce, is Dr. Napoleon K. Juanillo Jr. As the Assistant Secretary for Competitiveness and Innovation for the Department of Trade and Industry, ASEC Juanillo oversees the programmatic implementation and establishment of the Regional Inclusive Innovation Centers. He also directs the planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of plans, programs, projects, and activities of the innovation and collaboration, startup development, and creative industry groups. He also leads the socializing of DTI's innovation and competitiveness policies, programs, and initiatives among the agency's stakeholders. ASEC Juanillo is also the president and CEO of Access Health, which runs the Bicol Access Health Centrum, the founder of the Newfield STEM Schools, and the founder and CEO of the Institutes for Research, Innovation, and Scholarship. ASEC Juanillo, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Tiago, for that kind introduction. And again, to Business World Insights. And thank you very much for inviting the DTI Competitiveness and Innovation Group. As you very well know, this week we're also running rather busily the Philippine Startup Week. And innovation, competitiveness, and digitalization are the primary thrusts of the Department of Trade and Industry. And so this is really something that is very important to us to share with you some of our thoughts, our programs, and our plans together as a country. I'm going to just talk very briefly about how to build the innovation entrepreneurial culture, not just in Philippine universities, but particularly in our regions. One of the things that I have been tasked to do is the establishment of regional inclusive innovation centers in all 16 regions in the Philippines. And of course, when we do talk about innovation, we're talking about the infrastructure, we're talking about the culture, we're talking about the environment, we're talking about all of these imperatives for digitalization and ensuring that all our stakeholders are up to par as to where the whole world is in terms of the global digitalization conversation. And so if I may share the first slide, please. The Regional Inclusive Innovation Centers are basically one of the projects of the DTI as almost like a frontline project. These are virtual or physical platforms for collaborative programs purposely to generate products, processes, or service innovations that are deemed important to the goal of inclusive growth and development of the respective regions. There is no one size fits all for regional digitalization or competitiveness thrust. We have to allow each region to craft its own innovation charisma, as it were. So it is inclusive as they pertain to products, processes, or service innovations, or other types of tech solutions that may benefit the common good in the regions. Inclusiveness is also about the way of ideating, prototyping, or working on the innovation itself. Is that in that it provides everyone a chance, particularly our MSMEs, to have access to shared facilities. And so the operative word is always shared facilities, shared expertise, and shared resources for their improvement and growth, as well as to form partnerships and collaborations within various stakeholders in the regions. Our RICs recognize that all key actors in the ecosystem should move as one and seamlessly in pursuit of common innovation targets that are salient to the region. And so we have seen some of these expressions in terms of government, academe, industry partnerships, or even partnerships with MSMEs, access to shared service facilities such as R&D laboratories, fabrication laboratories, and in the case of regional startups that we're talking about this week in the Philippine Startup Week, access to capital, both foreign and local. Next slide, please. Our role in the RICs is very simple. I usually call it the operational role of the DTI. And basically, we lead in identifying opportunities for our stakeholders to move up the value chain, to create or discover niches, to compete in domestic or international markets, to lead in advising, mentoring, and informing our enterprises on how to add value to their products, services, processes, and systems, and to inform our partners about new utilizable solutions that can respond to community or regional needs, knowing very well that all the stakeholders in the RICS are actually pursuing some common goals or thrusts, such as, of course, advancing economic potential, addressing societal changes, enriching the scientific and innovative potential. All of this are common agenda of the DOST, of the industries, of the chambers, of almost everybody acting in unison in the region. But for us in the DTI, we have our own core value propositions. Next slide, please. And so our role there is to just basically to ensure that we provide the necessary policy support and investments on regional priorities and address those challenges and needs for us, for the regions to compete in knowledge-based development, to build on the region's strengths as a kind of whisper as to where they can possibly excel, what are their competitive advantages and the potential for business-directed innovation and competitiveness, to support technological as well as practice-based innovation and get our stakeholders fully engaged and be much more, I should say, customer-facing, market-driven in all of their experimentations, and to basically also tell them about the what are the market needs, what are the consumer needs, what are the consumer behaviors, what are the market forecasts, and how do we basically evaluate ourselves in light of the changes in the world. And so at the same time, we're providing the enabling structures and programs and projects that can engender and advance entrepreneurial development. Next slide, please. So all of these things are important for us. There is no, I should say, proverbial leader in the RICS. Everybody in the RICS is important. And so any stakeholder, whether it's a chamber or a private enterprise, can lead the Regional Inclusive Economic Center. However, for the DTI, our role is to just really continue to advance the agenda of enterprise-driven, enterprise-facing, customer-facing innovation and competitiveness. And hence, I think some of the agenda, or let's say the topics that we're going to be talking about, such as the fourth industrial revolution, digitalization, building the innovation and entrepreneurial culture, and of course, competitive thinking, are part and parcel of, building and making sure that that ecosystem is robust. Next slide, please. you know I'm much more interested in how do we connect all of these actors in the so-called ecosystem. Next slide, please. I'm interested in this framework because I am a scientist myself, a scholar. At the same time, I'm a businessman. And so I've always looked at this in terms of the continuum of knowledge production or knowledge generation to knowledge utilization, and of course, the commercialization of that knowledge. we have to put to good use the knowledge or the foundational blocks that we put in. Already, I think there's a lot of investment that our state universities and colleges and the UST, the Commission on Higher Education, even the Department of Agriculture, and even some of our private universities are doing in terms of knowledge production and knowledge generation. But most of the time, the expressions of this knowledge generation are found in publications or in research papers or in conferences. But I think there's more than that. We have to transfer that knowledge. And so transferring this knowledge perhaps to another instrument of the government or instrumentation of the government, such as TESTA, DepEd, and SHED, is important. So this will find itself in terms of new learning materials, new textbooks, etc., etc. That could basically, enhance or advance, whatever it is that we've found out. But it's more than that. We have to make sure that we can translate that into something that has commercial value. And this is where the DTI can come in. To what extent can we tell others that there is probably a market for some of the technologies that we generate in the universities, that there's probably a market for some of the prototypes or nascent, I should say, experimentations that we're doing in our state universities and colleges and even private universities. And so that's the whole idea, to be able to kind of get everybody in this conversation, be much more attuned, and I should say, sharpen our radars as to what the world needs in terms of products, processes, and services, and see, how best we can harness all our scientific, technological, engineering, and creative potential to be able to address all of these market needs around the world. And so, to be able to translate any knowledge into having some commercial value is not a denigration of scholarship, it's not a denigration of research. In fact, R&D even becomes more fun and exciting as we continue to pivot and, I should say, translate, transform, revisit, revise, do almost everything from scratch and do the iteration for as long as we do have the data that can tell us it's time for us to keep on changing. And I think that's the whole challenge of innovation and digitalization and addressing the whole competitiveness question. Next slide, please. So to begin with, our government, us, it's not just our government, it's us. As taxpayers, we've invested nearly $1.7 billion pesos, sorry, on the so-called niche centers in the regions for R&D. It's called NICER under the Department of Science and Technology. So a lot of these things are, for instance, invested in such, I should say, commodities as mangoes, pineapples, coconuts, even seafood, etc., etc. But the question is, to what extent have we uh, come up with products, processes, or service, or systems, or other types of solutions around these topical areas so that we can translate that into something that has commercial value? Well, that's the challenge. So I think we're not exactly starting from scratch. The foundational blocks are there, so it's just a matter of moving the needle so that it goes all the way to commercialization, and of course possibly pivoting just so we can address, I should say, dynamic customer concerns. Next slide, please. One of the things too, and I think this must have been mentioned by Dr. Fita Aldaba, the Undersecretary for Competitiveness and Innovation Group, is that we're also working on the National Artificial Intelligence Strategy, if only to kind of provide another way to, because the AI strategy of the Philippines is again another manifestation of looking at the products in terms of the continuum from knowledge generation to commercialization. And so, under the national AI strategy, we have such pillars as the implementation and innovation, of course, the strategic dimension, digitalization and infrastructure development, workforce development is important, and of course, R&D. So, in other words, the AI is just an instrument. But to the extent that we can use that instrument to basically produce new products, knowledge, and processes, and again, not just for scholarship's sake or not just for knowledge production's sake, but in terms of really, I should say, strolling down along the continuum of commercialization. That is what we mean to have. That is what we mean to demonstrate and to pursue under the national AI strategy. So I just kind of highlighted it to just kind of tell us that government is doing everything along the what is dynamically required now in the global knowledge economy to be able to take us through what's the latest in the conversation and how best we can remain competitive. Next slide, please. So these are some of the key recommendations. Of course, pushing the boundaries of AI, building robust and connected network environments because it's all about digitalization. I'm just really kind of wanting to emphasize to you that, you know, uh, we're not too far removed from this kind of conversation that the business world wants to initiate. We are pretty much into it, very much immersed in the meetings and the discussions. And mind you, when we talk about government is composed of, you know, really brilliant technocrats too. You know, these are not your usual, I should say, politicians. These are highly trained, highly educated Filipinos. And I think that's one of the things that we also want our audience to realize that, you know, amidst all our problems, there's, I should say, a deep bench of really brilliant, talented engineers and scientists and creative thinkers and thought leaders in government. That's basically pushing for the same kind of thrust and ideals that you're all talking about. Next slide, please. But certainly, again, this is where we're talking about meat and potatoes now. If you're talking about the foundational primary seed beds of knowledge generation, and most of them are state universities and colleges, there are about 2,000 universities and colleges in the Philippines. But when we tried surveying the state universities and colleges about their innovation readiness, about their digitalization readiness, only 4% said that they're kind of ready. Nearly about 52% said that they're not that ready, and 44% are saying that they're moderately ready. Next slide, please. So again, if you take a look at the diagnostic web on innovation for all state universities and colleges covering SUCS 1, 2, and 3, 4 levels, you can see here that no one is actually hitting, the outer axis of 3.0. Everybody's just talking about lows on infrastructure, lows on basic research, low on industry-facing research, low on industry-facing teaching, low in 21st century facing teaching, and moderate in all the other aspects. So in other words, there's a lot of, I should say, things to be done, certainly a lot of opportunities maybe, but in terms of the readiness, I think we have, remember that whole continuum that I showed you before. Knowledge generation is key, knowledge production is so foundational to innovation and to even competing in the global knowledge economy. But this is the state of this is the status of our state universities and colleges. Next slide, please. And so you can see here whether it's a SUC level 1, SUC level 2, SUC level 3, or SUC level 4, they share these common white bands. And the common white bands are basically the low scores. So low score in industry facing research, low score in basic and applied research, low score in management of innovation, and low score as well in 21st century uh, facing curriculum, and low score in industry facing curriculum. And to some extent, some low score in global research and innovation initiatives. And so I think this is a wake up call to all of us. It's good for us to be ambitious, which is great, but but we have to be data driven in terms of our priorities, in terms of the policies that we make. To that extent, this is the state of innovation in our state universities and colleges, where we invest a lot because there's free tuition for our students. There's also nearly our R&D investments are poured into the University of the Philippines and, of course, our SUCs. Next slide, please. Again, this is just another snapshot just to kind of demonstrate where the low points are. So it's pretty much the same kind of, I should say, conclusion. Next slide, please. So, in other words, to just kind of end here, we're interested in the regional inclusive innovation centers. Now, partnered with the data that we have about our souks, which are all regional based, we want to kind of ask them to come up with their own regional unique propositions. How best are they going to pursue innovation, digitalization, competitiveness in the global knowledge economy? So with this, I think I'm gonna be discussing some more during the Q&A if there are questions for me. But this is just a snapshot of where we are. A little bit problematic, but we continue to remain hopeful. I always say that as an educator, we are 106 million plus talents and brains, and with brains together, there's just no question that we can all overcome these challenges and be very competitive in the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asek. And thank you for making the time right in the middle of Philippine Startup Week. Very glad this session can serve as a platform for you to share some of the exciting collaborations across the knowledge commercialization continuum you mentioned being championed. So we'll definitely be hearing more about that later during the Q&A. Thank you. And joining Asek Juanillo on today's panel, we have the Chief Information Officer of Coca-Cola Beverages, Philippines, Winnie Talosig Rebancos. As a member of Coca-Cola's senior leadership team, Ms. Rebancos spearheads the company's technology strategy in the Philippines, drawing on more than 20 years of industry experience and expertise. In 2020, she was awarded by the Global CIO Forum as a Legend CIO at the World CIO 200 Roadshow across the Asia-Pacific region. Ms. Rebancos is widely recognized for her key contributions to technology, culture, and new ways of working, underpinned by a deep knowledge of cloud, artificial intelligence, data analytics, cybersecurity, e-commerce, and customer experience solutions. Aside from technology, Mr. Abancos staunchly supports women empowerment and is also passionate about mentoring diverse and young talents. Mr. Abancos, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tiago, for the introduction. Thank you for having me and Coca-Cola share our journey and fully aligned with ASEC NAP's vision and ambition for the country. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be able to share our digital journey. We are proud of the many significant initiatives and many milestones reached despite all the challenges we've had to face. But as a business, we remain committed to invest in our people, our business, and the Philippines. We've been in the country for over 100 years, and we look forward to the next 100 years with even more excitement than ever before. While COVID has remained a challenge to our industry, the business community, and the retail sector specifically, we remain committed to our people, our customers, and we know we are only as strong as the communities we serve. So we will continue to ensure our bright and shared future. One of our core strategies towards securing the future is digital, the development and institutionalization of a future fit infrastructure that is, and the evolution to a culture that is hungry for growth and innovation. Let me briefly share with you our operational footprint in the Philippines for some additional context. We continue investing for a long-term growth with 20 manufacturing plants, over 70 distribution centers, 10,000 associates, supporting 1 million sari-sari stores, and providing opportunities for over 70,000 individuals throughout our value chain. In the last 18 months, we have been challenged, but our teams have risen to the challenge in the most exceptional of ways, something I am incredibly proud about. Our commitment remains unwavering to refresh the Philippines and to make a difference. CCBPI's digital transformation places emphasis on technology as a strategic differentiator for our organization, one that helps strengthen our place at the forefront of the industry. It allows us to optimize what we have now, and it also empowers us to innovate, transform, and evolve the company and the business. We reimagined and reframed what the future will look like, drawing out from our ambition. Our digital agenda ensures that our approach to shaping our digital transformation is easily understood by all. Empowering the enterprise to support speed and agility is focused on our desired state for our infrastructure, which is cloud enabled, mobile, and highly scalable. We believe that a nimble and agile infrastructure will help us get ahead of the game and faster to serve our customers. Last year, in the midst of the pandemic, we moved our data center to the cloud. This has given us and our teams the speed to market we all wanted to achieve. Enabling the workforce to perform their jobs anywhere and anyhow, making them more productive and engaging so that in turn they can become more customer focused and are prioritizing work that matters most. Digitizing the value chain by providing the right tools for each of the roles and taking out work that are not essential. From the shop floors to the warehouses, all the way to the market, we are always mobile first. The last pillar talks about expediting our transformation through exponential improvements in the data and analytics, modern platforms, and self service tools. We launched two female bots this year, Aling Cora, short for Coke Retailer app, and Eva, our employee virtual assistant. Both are blending in as part of our workforce, helping us out in the stuff where we needed more hands. Last Friday, our 3D printer arrived in our Santa Rosa plant, encouraging everyone to be as creative and maximize the potential of that disruptive technology. At the bottom, you can see that those are our must haves. When you want to be faster, you need to open yourself up to the world. And in doing so, we needed to be cyber secure. We followed where our associates go and where they work. We were the first in Asia to implement cloud based secure access, which allowed us the following year, the pandemic year, to easily convert 4,000 of our associates to work from home in a day. Landscape simplification is another imperative. As we move to a world of speed and agility, the key to enabling business faster is to be in a composable environment, plug and play, no or minimal complexities. Lastly, agile organization. The success of a digital transformation is not reliant on technology, but on the people, the culture, and the mindset. If the change is seen as positive, inclusive, and as an opportunity for learning and growth, the organization is able to create the future it needs. So the world continues to evolve, and so do we. The photo on the left were our fleet way back even before I was born, while the photo on the right already shows our Euro 4 to 5 compliant trucks with GPS system in place to further strengthen safety and to better serve our customers. It's a continuous journey of improvement, innovation, and transformation. We have achieved a lot over the last years, but a lot more to do. We are very excited for the future. Maraming salamat po and back to you, Tiago.
Thank you, Mr. Bancos, for that quick insider look at how a century-old company stays agile and innovative. Would love to dive a little deeper into those strategies you mentioned later during the Q&A. So our third panelist is none other than Jesus C. Romero, Chief Operations Officer of Converge ICT Solutions. Serving as Converge's COO since 2016, Mr. Romero oversees and manages the company's day-to-day operations, covering revenue generation, customer experience, product development, and organic growth initiatives through partnerships. Prior to joining Converge, Mr. Romero held senior leadership positions spanning the full spectrum of operations across Globe Telecom, DTSI Group, Comstream Corporations, and Hughes Network Systems. He is a leader in market entry, growth, and transformation across the areas of telecommunications, systems integration, and IT services. Mr. Romero, thanks for joining us. You have the screen.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Innovation, as defined by the World Bank study, as mentioned above, innovation imperative for developing East Asia, is not just about invention of a new product or process, but also adoption of existing technologies that leads firms to new ways of producing and acting. In Converge, innovation is deeply ingrained. The beneficial end result is we are able to adapt and create new products, solutions, and experiences for our customers. What is innovation? To us, it's a different way and a better way of serving customer needs. Innovation to us is not just about being new for the sake of being new. It's a modern solution that serves a purpose. And in the case of Converge, it's serving the customers. And that is what that drives our innovation. So how and why are we doing this? We are guided by one goal: to fiber power the Filipino nation. So we want to be able to empower people, businesses, and the nation to be its best. Because we have the best interests of our customers at heart, we're able to push the envelope, to be creative, and to provide solutions that have never been tried before. Next slide, please. A result of this is we have introduced several market leading products and services, some of them actually even first in the world. For example, in the Philippines, first to do micro trenching, which allows us to roll out quickly in congested central business areas. The ILU, or we call it the invisible wire, is a innovative fiber that we use for inside wiring of houses where it's quite difficult to install fiber. This one is very unintrusive and makes it more palatable for customers when we install their fiber. Auto provisioning. Today, our technicians can actually activate customer connections through a mobile app out in the field. No need for an engineer to manually do it or some back-end person to push a button. We were the first to deploy high bandwidth backbones. First, 400 gigabit waves, second, 800 gigabit waves. And of course, we had radically transformed our back-end, and it enabled us to launch very innovative products that have not been copied today. For example, 10499, the time of day product, fast, which is now being adopted quickly by multi-branch, very secure requirements of large enterprises. Next slide, please. And how do we foster this? Converge is trying to create a culture of innovation to support its digital transformation. So, what are some of the key things that we look at? We needed to develop a process for discovering unsolved problems, and even better, discovering unstated needs. Because if you do this, then you will get into a place where nobody has ever gone before. And, following another framework we really like, the Blue Ocean Strategy, creating segments or markets that have not been tapped. You need to set the stage to allow innovation to prosper. You need to make sure that people feel that innovation is something that's encouraged, that you are not going to be punished for making mistakes, and that there will be ways to help you make your ideas reality. Providing an enabling function. Again, there are a lot of smart people out there, but maybe they don't really know how to turn their ideas into real beneficial innovations. So there must be an enabling function, experts who would guide, coach, and motivate everyone in the organization. We don't necessarily say that we have an innovation group. Innovation is with everyone. And lastly, we always ask the question, why or why not? So when somebody proposes something, somebody will always say, why do you want to do that? And then somebody will even ask at the same time, and why not? Right? So these are the ways that we are trying to foster a culture of innovation among the people. Last slide. So in closing, our mantra in Converge has always been experience better. We believe that technology is for the people. We believe that technology is the enabler. It's not the solution per se. The wrong technology applied to the right problem, or the right technology applied to the wrong problem, wouldn't work. So in Converge, every day, we go to work thinking of new ways to make things better, whether it's a new product, a new operating model, our network infrastructure, or in the customer experience. And this is something that we are continuing to do. And I think we have largely been successful. And in the end, again, bottom line, so that we can serve our customers and the nation better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. As an enabler in digital infrastructure, you really do play a major role in empowering all the key stakeholders that ASIC mentioned earlier. So it's fantastic to see your company embracing a culture of innovation internally, but also finding ways to extend that towards your clients and ecosystem partners as well. Let's dive into that later during the panel. Now, let's welcome our fourth and final expert today. Rounding out our panel, Mr. Shiju Varghese, Country Head of Tata Consultancy Services, Philippines. Responsible for the firm's strategy, growth, and business operations for the Philippine and global markets, Mr. Varghese leads IT consulting and digital transformation for the largest conglomerates in the Philippines, as well as business process services for global clients. Mr. Varghese, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Diego, and it's impressive to hear from all the panelists before me. And it's extremely encouraging to see that TCS, we are proud to say that we are the largest IT company today in the world, are not the only ones, because every organization seems to be now an IT organization after listening from all the panelists that I heard just now. And I'm convinced that continuous, scaled, and fast innovation is a necessity now for any enterprise to stay relevant to their customers. In my view, enterprises are now more than ever is led by innovation to solve existing problems and creating new demands in a much better way and efficient way. And that's what we saw as a result that we heard from Vinny and Serverboy. There are new and emerging technologies such as cloud computing, artificial intelligence, which have blurred the industry boundaries now. Therefore, have lowered the barrier to entry and also made small and frequent innovations critical for any business to success. It's clear that no organization can exist without innovation now. Enterprises have dedicated teams to create the next version of the products or services, and we experience it daily. Converge being the best example. Some enterprises encourage innovations in every department, but still, from my perspective, from an IT organization perspective, what we see in the marketplace is innovation as an activity across the organization is rare, and there is a lot way ground for us to cover. Innovation culture is all about harnessing creativity outside the research labs. Research and innovation in most organizations is confined to specific department. Crowdsourcing innovation, as we call in TCS, is difficult to manage though. And often the value created doesn't seem giving the returns to the efforts employed. But that's a mistake to assume that way. In almost all organizations, employees need a channel to go and do things differently. They need to learn, they need a platform to learn from other departments. They need a foundation where they can exchange ideas. In TCS, I can vouch that we experiment crowdsourcing innovation and have brought excitement in the way the people operate and people function in various departments. There is always a vibrancy among the employees when we introduce those experiments. We have seen organizations have efficient processes that iron out the exceptions and keep a very tight rein on time, cost, and resources. While this has proven benefits in the past, This loses out on innovations that an organization can bring by synergies that it can create, which are learning from other groups, cross-functional problems and solving them, and crowdsourcing ideas, giving an organization an edge over competition and be future ready. I would say today every company is a technology company. As I said, companies either create technology or are the users of technology. An innovation culture, therefore, prepares an organization to embrace the digital journey, which is rapidly getting better and it is changing at an unprecedented rate. And with that, I think as an IT organization, TCS presence in the Philippines, and I represent about 5,000 plus people that we are here today, uh, brings the expertise that we have across the globe, our presence and experience and exposure that we have from the 50 plus countries that we are present in, and the investments that we make in creating new technologies and building new frameworks is what we bring to this country. And we are eager to partner with our customers here and bring that efficiencies which our citizens in the Philippines can see and feel. And I think we are all set for a good journey ahead from embracing that innovation culture and being digital ready as we move forward. Back to you, Tiago.
Thank you, Mr. Varghese, for that wonderful overview of the trends and opportunities that are shaping our digital journeys for the years to come. It's a fantastic way to frame today's panel discussion, which I'm very happy to jump right into now. So, if I can invite all our speakers back on screen with me. Hello, everyone. So we
Hi,
have a
Tiago.
number. Hi. So we have a number of questions coming in from our audience, but I do have a few questions of my own that I'd like to start with. I'll be directing these to specific speakers, but please feel free to chime in with any insights that you might want to add. Let's just keep this free flowing. Uh, so far, this session, we explored the importance of culture as the sustaining force of our digital journeys. But before we dive deeper into that, perhaps we can start with a really quick bit of context for the Philippine setting. So this first question is for Asa Juanillo. How far along would you rate the Philippines in its digital journey? And how would you describe the country's general culture of innovation?
Um, Chago, I have to be very safe in my answer. I can only I can only go back to the research that I have done with the Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges and the United States Agency for International Development STRIDE program. Those slides that are presented to you are basically products of that particular research. And hence I think they are basically those snapshots are representative of the kind of I should say demonstrated sentiment and objective assessment of vice presidents for research and extension, as well as presidents of state universities and colleges, as to where they are in terms of this innovation journey and in terms of the whole digitalization process. Now, you've mentioned culture. And I think there has been a lot of back and forth as well with the DUST, the DTI, the DICT, and all the other agencies. Never before have I seen the government constantly in discussions with not discussion, but in conversation with each other. And so I think this whole question about how far along, I think the intensity of our discussions are indicative of we've started some, but we're still not quite there yet. So in a sense, we're heavily dependent on people like Mr. Romero and Mr. Bancos, the private sector, in actually assisting and working with the government in instilling this culture. Because the private sector has pretty much moved, I should say, rather in a much more advanced fashion, and is actually I must say at the forefront of really bringing this culture to the Philippines. And so we give hats off to that. But as far as government programs are concerned, we may be aggressive, but we're also hobbled by a lot of internal barriers within government. You know, the bureaucracy. I won't delve into that. And because souks are government, they too are hobbled by some, I should say, bureaucratic roadblocks, etc., which kind of delay the innovation journey of it. So if you're gonna ask me passion wise, it's 100%, you know, but whether operations wise, you know, we can move as fast as the private sector, maybe that's not there yet. But at least in terms of, I should say, because many of us are also from academia, we do know what it is to move this journey along the way. And so, all I can say is that thanks to an aggressive private sector, Coca-Cola, Converge, we have to be very dependent on these engineers and scientists to help us along the way as well.
Great.
Sorry, Tiago. I just like to say
No,
that.
fantastic answer. And as you know, we're looking to the private sector. Mr. Varghese, maybe you can. I'll throw a follow up to you. From your experience guiding organizations from the private sector through their own digital transformations, what technologies do you see being the most impactful enablers when it comes to creating cultures of innovation?
Sergio, there are various ways to inculcate innovation as a culture in any organization. Let me give you three specifics from my perspective that we have seen. Right, one is build a culture of embracing the digital. Right, first step is to embrace digital. Second could be, as earlier mentioned, the establishing of innovation labs in the organizations. And most importantly, reward them, reward your people, right? So rewarding the discovery is another aspect which can definitely bring that culture in. See, innovation is in for those companies, that aim to make the shift from traditional way of functioning to a digital enabled processes. Essentially means going digital is often the first step in creating an innovation culture, right? There are examples, which is mobile payments, for example, mobile product recommendations initiatives that has come up, for example. Now, these are about embracing the digital. Now, when we establish an innovation lab, creating it would mean it serves two purposes essentially. There is one of the byproduct of such innovation lab is collaboration between the IT organization and the business processes and business organizations, right? And enabling and rewarding those experiments which happens there bring forth those confidence in people, which essentially ensures that they give an environment for them wherein they are not fearful about failures. So creating that environment where it's a freedom to fail feeling that you give to your employees. So that really helps, if in terms of building that innovative culture from my perspective.
Mr. Romero, speaking of technology, these technologies, connectivity solutions play a vital role as well in creating and sustaining company cultures. As an expert in this field, could you explain to us how these solutions can engender innovative environments?
I think it's quite simple. No? So a lot of the tools and platforms that we use have been moving to the cloud. And even if you had localized tools, the benefit is definitely enhanced when it's married with data tools and applications in the cloud. So you can imagine a situation where you are unable to connect to those resources, or you are unable to connect to them in a way that allows you to become productive. I mean, like this conference is a very good example. In the past, this would not really have been possible. I mean, we're running a video conference across different locations, high quality, only empowered by networks that are not only high speed but also high quality. Taking things like latency, jitter, packet loss, all of those. Oh, and by the way, becoming very affordable. So today, with the digital lifestyle of people, not only work not only collaboration, but even the daily lives are fully dependent on a fully interconnected ecosystem. And at the heart of that is network connectivity.
Alongside technologies in the software, hardware, infrastructure sense, there definitely are other strategies that companies can embrace to support a culture of innovation. Mr. Varghese touched on these earlier. Management styles, feedback mechanisms, continued learning programs are also other examples. Mr. Bancos, from your experience running a massive company, one of the largest, in fact, how does one ensure that culture, specifically a culture of innovation, is embraced by the entire corporate community?
I totally agree with all the responses earlier, Tiago. Actually, the culture of innovation can only become part of a company's DNA if it starts from the leadership. So in CCBPI, we encourage everyone to innovate, to improve ways of working. And our first cultural move on this was when our CEO renamed our head office to support center. It changed the impression that ideas are always centralized from the head office. It removed that notion. So we ran business process improvement presentations. People have become more empowered to generate ideas and they were excited to even propose improvements. Another cultural thing we did was because of one of our cultural values or core values has helped us to test innovation faster, and that is to uh, progress to be we believe in progress over perfection or in version 2.0. There is no small idea to begin with, it as long as it generates results. So whether it's huge or not, we start with step one and then we continuously improve. So as Shiju has mentioned earlier, that you should not be afraid of making mistakes. Fail fast and recover fast should be it.
So I'd like to talk now about the support structures in place to assist organizations embarking on their digital journeys. ASEC Manilio touched on this earlier with the regional inclusive innovation centers. There are many programs and services offered by the public sector to help cultivate innovative cultures across industries. But I'd like to ask Mr. Romero, as an enabler in digital infrastructure yourself, could you describe some of the similar support systems that connectivity providers offer organizations looking to digitally transform?
Well, if you're talking about what we do for external customers, that's probably more for Siju, right? We're not an SI or an IT company. So I can only speak about what we do internally and also from past experiences. There have been many methods that have been applied. In a previous life, there was even a formal so called innovation group, an innovation hub. Personally, I think for me, what has worked uh, better is that the innovation is actually spread across the organization, but then you have certain enablers, as I had mentioned before. Um, you allow people to be innovative and to come up with innovations, but then you provide support so that they can get to that right answer. Let me give you an example. There was a situation before where there was a burning question. We are rolling out network nodes too slow. And then we looked at the problem, and it's basically because it's being done the traditional way. You look for a room in a building, in an apartment, in an office. You rent the room, you apply for permits, you retrofit the room, and now it's a room, so you need to have aircon power, generators, batteries, the whole shebang. It takes forever. So, we ask our people, please tell us what is a better way to do this thing. We launched a contest. We had a program manager who was very steeped in Six Sigma, for example, and we got submissions. We even had a prize, no, pretty big, 200,000 for the best idea. But frankly, the results were a bit disappointing. So then we decided that I think we should complement it by providing coaches. Coaches won't be people who actually tell them what to do, but ask them questions, keep on asking questions, and keep on guiding them, but never giving them the answer. The net result was, we were one of the first to develop. Well, we didn't develop it. No, we had somebody design it. A box that you put on the road. You see many of those today, in the telco, but we were the only one who had a box in the road that could accept equipment that only works in data centers. Equipment that works in data centers require very controlled temperature, very controlled environment, humidity, dust, and so on. So it was successfully done. And after that initiative, quickly 700 nodes deployed nationwide. But again, the bottom line there, it was one engineer who came up, with the germ of the idea, but he needed help to perfect it. If you throw that to an innovation hub, I'm not sure if we could have gotten the same result. Why? Because there you have people who know frameworks and processes, but do not know the domain. Here, somebody knows the domain. I'm a field engineer. I know how to maintain this thing. I don't have a framework. I don't know the process. So you have to marry the two. So that's how we're also trying to do it here. No? We don't necessarily have an innovation hub, but we have many people who are willing and able to step in and help guide and mentor people with great ideas.
That sounds like the crowdsourcing innovation in action, and great insights on the follow through necessary for that. Mr. Marcos, I'm hoping you can further ground this conversation with some anecdotes of your own. How does an innovative culture help a company achieve excellence? Perhaps in terms of efficiency in manufacturing, or in ensuring your products meet evolving customer tastes. I'm sure you have a century of experience to pull from here.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tiago. Would you believe that some of our production lines are actually older than anyone in this call? But that's not stopping us from producing top quality beverages. What we do to compensate for those old lines, we continuously improve our systems and continuously develop our people who run the lines. You might be surprised that despite the age, our line efficiencies are very high, meaning we get high yields and minimal downtime. One cultural change that we also did in the manufacturing area was to modify the production line operator position title. We call them now production line engineers. So this drastically impacted the mindset and the attitude in the most positive way. They felt proud of the work that they do in Coke as they were called engineers. They were also enrolled to training courses to equip them, upskill them, reskill them, and get them ready for the future roles that they want to have. With the title and the knowledge, it became natural for them to want to become a better version of themselves. So, how does it help as we evolve together with customer preferences? We are a total beverage company. We have beverages in different categories, different sizes, different flavors. And these are all because we listen to our customers. We are not stopping with where we are now, so please expect that we will continue to launch products that will refresh the Filipino communities. We have a top notch customer service group also who takes care of our customers' evolving needs. And we continue to leverage a lot on data. We partner with very good analytics companies who help us look at optimization in our logistics, manufacturing, and commercial areas. Technology will always be one of the best tools to improve customer experience. And in the coming months, we will be embarking on a very huge transformational journey that will change how we work internally and how we view our customers holistically.
Incredibly insightful. And I'd love to hear from Mr. Varghese on this. Coca-Cola is a wonderfully inspiring case study for the fruits one might reap from engendering a culture of innovation. But I think in looking towards these success stories, many companies suffer from simply stopping at this wait and see mentality, right? So they look at what's working for others and then try to replicate them. I might be wrong here, but that feels counter to the spirit of innovation. So I'm curious, how do you advise a business? How do you advise businesses going about innovating to stay competitive, as opposed to simply replicating what their competitors are doing?
Yeah, see, there is, I would say that, to begin with, one organization has to articulate an innovation strategy that aligns with the overall business strategy. Without such a strategy, the companies will have a hard time weighing the trade-offs of various practices, such as crowdsourcing and customer co-creation that we spoke about. Without an innovation strategy in place, organizations will find it difficult to align different parts of the organization with the shared priorities as well. Right. So I can give you an example which I read some time back. At Collins, a leader in glass and material science has found an innovation strategy must address how innovation will create value for potential customers, how the company will capture a share of that value, what type of innovations to pursue. People do tend to discount, let me caution, that routine innovation that leverages a company's existing technical capabilities and business model, and they focus on disruptive innovation alone. That's probably a mistake to make, right? I would say you should focus on both. A company's unique competitiveness should dictate that innovation portfolio for itself and not really replicate what others are doing. Therefore, and Vinny spoke about it some time back. The best of innovation cuts across functions in the organization, and only senior leaders can set an innovation strategy in doing so. They must recognize that the strategy, like the process of innovation in itself, because innovation is not a one-stop solution, it's a process and it's a journey. It requires continual experimentation and, to serve a voice point, adaptation as well.
Great insights there. We have a question from the audience here. Let's direct this to, well, it's directed towards the entire panel. As things ease in the Philippines and hybrid work school setups slowly become the norm, what trend do you see shaping technology for enterprises in the years to come? I suppose, top of your head, what single trend do you see shaping technology for enterprises in the years to come? Anyone want to volunteer to take a stab at that first?
Maybe I can take the
Absolutely.
first one, Tiago. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the future of work is already happening. The people now work from home, and there is a mix to that. People going to office and people working from home. The other piece is that we already have blended workforce. I talked about bots being introduced into the system, helping out to reduce work that are very repetitive, and then for people to focus more on work that matters most. So how will it change? I think we will. This is already accelerating the future. So what we do now is already what we need to do in the future, and even more. So we need to look at a hybrid workforce. We need to look at gig economy. I think we have an opportunity to see for ourselves how can working moms also play into huge roles. How can part-time workers also play into companies and also help out in the roles and responsibilities that this company set out. Technologies will always be there to enable them, and I think that the hybrid workforce is going to happen and is already happening right now. So there you go.
Technology to grow that pie. It's very insightful. Asek, you touched on AI earlier during your opening statement. Would you say AI is the key game changer in the years to come?
Well, I think that's certainly the goal of the country. But before we talk about AI, let me just also talk about one of the foundational programs that we have, and that's the Philippine Skills Framework. And I think Mr. Bancos was talking about the future of work, and that's precisely what we also want to kind of, I should say, cultivate as part of engendering this new culture. The Philippine Skills Framework is not your usual academic framework, and so we're basically introducing a set of skills, basically along the lines of upskillings and retooling, etc. Working very closely as well with TESDA, and to some extent the Commission on Higher Education and the Department of Education. But this isn't your usual entry into the formal education. We believe that non-formal education, particularly those that kind of instill digital skills, is the way to go. And hence, I think prior to even talking about something as big as AI, you know, slowly introducing them into some of these skills would be a way to go. Yeah, so I think that's one of the messages that I also want to convey to our audience today.
Absolutely. Building that foundation. Mr. Varghese.
Yeah, I'll give you a perspective. So this is, and I hear Ms. Vinny also talking about the workforce and the future of workforce. What I would like to, say to the audience is, workforce, when you are based in Philippines, don't see yourself as a resource or a skill for Philippine organizations. The digital disruption that has brought in is we are working in an environment of a global workforce, of a shared pool of workforce, which essentially means an organization based in US, Europe, UK, Australia, or any part of the world can employ you, and you can deliver the results, the work. You can work with an organization based in Philippines as well. So it has essentially, dropped down the boundaries that traditionally used to think of how a workforce should be seen as. That boundary is completely gone. It's completely eroded. So it's a one single large world pool, which also enables organizations to tap into the talent and the pool and the skills and experience which is available at a global scale, without without having a block in the minds in terms of the geographical avenues to tap into. So I would say think global, Tiago.
Bit of a mindset shift necessary. Mr. Romero, perhaps you have the last say in this question.
Thank you. Well, let me make an analogy to what we call our operations glide path. So we have this objective of moving from the first stage of being reactive to proactive to predictive to adaptive. And this concept doesn't only apply to, let's say, a network operation. It also applies to marketing. So, reactive is seeing what's happening out there and, as was implied earlier, just copying what other people's do, right? Being proactive is being able to look at information and data and then trying to do something before, uh, something bad happens, whether it's a network going down or a customer taking a competitor taking your customer away. And then when you say predictive, then that's when you get into the realm really of things like big data, AI, NLP, all of those fancy, artificial intelligence based technologies. Then you go to the adaptive. When you go to the adaptive, then you need to have a way to control things. Then you have things like IoT, for example. You know, we were one of the pioneers. I used to work for Globe. It used to be called M2M, not so sexy, machine to machine. Now you call them Internet of Things. So, giving an example, um, we couldn't have reached the scale that we had if we did not implement, you know, well, let me use digital transformation. It's a jargon. I'm not a jargon type of person. Very early on, we had online application. So, we know it's going to be a journey because, when before we listed, we didn't have a tanungan. So we had online applications and there were still manual processes behind that. Pandemic hits. Salespeople cannot go out. Our online application portal was inundated. We had one of our best months during the pandemic, but the back end was struggling. Then, there are some basic technologies we can use. Robotic process automation. We deployed that, right? People cannot come to work. We deployed RPA. What happened to our people? Well, those that were not able to come to the office were working from home. Obviously, we're a fiber provider. It was not a big deal to us. But of course, we had to provide secure connection. And then their work evolved, no? From manually moving applications from one step to another, they became focused more on validating applications. We're quite strict with when you apply, you need to provide an ID, proof of billing, and so on and so forth. You have to eyeball them. Today, hopefully, with the help of TCS, who is doing the third wave of our digital transformation, hopefully, the last time we do this. OCR maybe, right? Optical character recognition, throw in some artificial intelligence. Maybe in the future, national ID and the credit scoring system becomes more mainstream. All of this can become automated. Then what happens to the people that we have again, right? We have to find the next level of upskilling for them. What are they gonna do next? Same thing with the network. No? Today, we're deploying a capability. We're looking at data. And by the way, this is one of those things. No? There's a ton of data out there. But if you don't know how to use the data, if you don't have an automated way of structuring the data, and more importantly, if you are not able to glean the right insight from data, all your digital transformation efforts are going to go to waste. So we have this capability today where we can see if a customer is potentially going to have a problem. with the fiber. Of course, if some evil person decides to cut it, like what happened to our network yesterday, we can't do anything. But if it is degrading little by little over time, we now have a way to see that. So to us, there are many technologies we can use. I've mentioned most of them. Another thing that bears watching really is it really the best thing to do to put this on the cloud, or is making it hybrid, partly on our network or part on the cloud, the
Mhm.
right thing to do? Because we've also run into situations where we've run out of capacity. We grow too fast and we cannot expand fast enough. We've also had, incidents where we put stuff on the cloud, then some guy screw up somewhere in the world and affects our instance. Then we're also down. So many different technologies, but to us the bottom line is it must be applied in the right situation. By the way, one of our key parameters, or our key directions, is that you never automate a broken process. So that's my point on this matter.
And a great way to frame that very iterative journey: reactive, proactive, adaptive. And I do like that bit of trivia around Internet of Things originally being M2M technologies. That's the power of branding for you. No. As we close today's discussion, I'd like to pose one final question for our panelists as a sort of closing remarks. For the leaders and decision makers in our audience today looking to invest in building up a culture of innovation in their organizations, what key lesson would you like them to take away from today's discussion? So perhaps we can start with Ms. Rebancos.
If I can, I hope to sum up in three things. No, first, every company's senior leadership team plays a huge role in creating a culture of innovation. We need to learn that people grow the business, and our main responsibility as leaders is to provide the opportunities where they can be the best of themselves. Second, the growth mindset, culture of progress over perfection, and an environment of failing fast and recovering fast will definitely accelerate your digital journey. And lastly, technology does not only pertain to devices, to wearables, to IoTs, it also means experience. So, digital and innovation must be brought about by the want to really provide the best experience for our customers, consumers, communities, and employees we serve. It was a very productive session. Thank you for having me, Tiago.
Thank you. Mr. Romero.
Uh, well, first of all, thank you for inviting us and for sharing our thoughts. Again, to us, the most important thing is that innovation must redound to the benefit of our consumers, of the public, and of course the country in the end. And as I mentioned, it's always all about starting to make sure that you know what problem you're fixing, um, making sure that you have mapped it properly before you try to engage in any digital effort. Sometimes it becomes just a bandwagon effect. You do this, you do that because somebody else is doing it. In our experience, we insulate ourselves from that, and we just make sure that we apply what kind of IT or automation or even network technology is the most appropriate to help us to deliver on our promise to our customers to experience better. As a side note, I think Winnie were very much aligned. I drink a lot of Coke. Hopefully, Coke in turn will buy a lot of Converge services. But some of the principles she mentioned is pretty much the same. From Jerry Ablasa, I remember his guidance: fail fast, fail originally. And I asked, what do you mean? If you don't fail, you're not trying new things, right? So we'll always be the same. But please fail originally. I will tolerate one time you make a mistake, but please don't make the mistake over and over again. And then, I think over time, we've taken that and we've encouraged people. Sometimes we do make mistakes. The worst mistake you can do is you scold somebody because they tried something new. And
Absolutely.
again, to us, it's all about that. That is what will really drive innovation. So we say you have to enable them, right? Of course, empowering says fail fast, fail originally. Last part is reward them as well. And when that happens, you'll see more people stepping up and trying to share, their innovative ideas and concepts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. Asek Manilio.
Yes, I'd like to talk about our regional inclusive innovation centers because I think that's the primary bedrock really for cultivating an innovation culture among us Filipinos and to see innovation as something that can really be salient to all the things that we see around us. And so I believe that cultivating a very strong sense of empathy, being sensitive to the problems around our regions, and then of course proposing the necessary solutions. And of course you can always pivot from one solution to another, depending on where your customers are, where your users are. All of these principles about failing fast, being not fearful of failures, but I think at the end of the day, it's just really putting customers and users at the forefront. If you're just really wanting to make sure that those solutions are adaptable, are usable, and can actually be, meaningful to everyone, and of course to solving everyday problems and making sure, life becomes comfortable every day for everyone. That's the kind of mantra that we have for our regional partners.
Thank you. And Mr. Varghese, you have the last say of the session today.
Yeah, I can wrap it up, Shago. And I echo with everything that was said by all of the panelists. Right? What I would want to leave a thought is innovation is beyond technologies. It is not only about technologies. And in TCS, let me share the experience of TCS from my perspective. And I'll give you four, antidotes, if I may call it. One, award innovations. It's important to award innovation. Second, crowdsourcing, right? We experiment with crowdsourcing, and every week we have an ideathon or hackathon or something running in. We get 10,600 plus entries just by doing the ideathons and hackathons. So crowdsource, right? Amplification, which is about telling people, getting the innovators to speak about what they've done to across departments and functions, and which can be then used to try solving a problem which is probably existing in any other functions or departments, right? Fourth, that has worked very well for us is, and we didn't touch upon in this discussion, is IPR creation. TCS has a dedicated team of IPR right cell, which basically reaches out to the innovators and look for unique and novelty of the innovation that they've done, and we help them file for IPR. Now that's how we reward people and we motivate people. So these four things I leave it, we leave as a thought for everyone to think about and pound on. And some of it we already spoken about. And just as a parting note, I would definitely like to thank Sir Baboy, Miss Winnie, and Sir Nap. It's an honor for me to be sharing the podium with all of you online here. Thank you. Over to you, Tiago.
A fantastic place to end today's conversation and a great setup for the rest of the four-part series that we have. Thank you so much for today's insightful chat. Asek Juanillo, Mr. Bancos, Mr. Romero, and of course, Mr. Varghese. It was really a pleasure chatting with you all today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Thiago. Thank you, guys.
And a big thank you as well to our partners who made today's session possible. Our supporting organizations, the Bank Marketing Association of the Philippines, the British Chamber of Commerce Philippines, the Management Association of the Philippines, and the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you as well to our media partner, the Philippine Star, for having me on yet another fantastic discussion. And of course, to everyone who joined today's discussion, wherever in the world you're joining from. We invite you to join us again in the next sessions of TCS and Business World Insights. Be sure to follow TCS Asia Pacific and Business World Online for updates on future projects. Again, my name is Tiago Hernaiz, and this has been TCS and Business World Insights, mapping out successful digital journeys. Maraming salamat, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great afternoon.